Welcome back to today's Rebel's Edge. In this episode, market moves are muted as America heads to the polls on this historic election day. Palantir pops on top and bottom beats on continued AI growth. Can this AI party continue for much longer? And finally, Celanese cuts the divvy and dives on weak quarterly demand and an outlook that is not so great. We're going to cover all of that and more on today's Rebel's Edge.
Bang.
Bang.
Yeah, and it could be a real banger today, Mark. By the way, down here in Puerto Rico, the gym that I work at closed at 8 a.m. today. It's a 24-hour gym, closed at 8 a.m. That's how seriously they take elections down here. And I know we're going to get into some election trades and the tight race and so forth. So I'll let you kick that part off, Mark, and then I'll jump in with a little more on the macro minute.
Yeah, sure, John. I mean, today's just got it's got that feeling in the air of change. I don't know. It's election day, especially in presidential election years. There's a palpable I don't know if it's tension or anticipation, but really, really interesting. And this, of course, we say time and time, most consequential election of our lifetime, most consequential election of our lifetime. Certainly the tightest race that most poll watchers have seen. So, and look, as we go into the very final home stretch of this thing, we are starting to see, this is our macro minute, we are starting to see some hedge funds putting on what some might describe as a Kamala trade, betting that maybe the dollar is weak, right, as compared to the Trump trades, strong dollar, shorting the yuan, the euro, and the peso. But look, DJT is up 18% today. Bitcoin's having another bit of a run. John, what are you seeing in the macro minute on this election day?
Well, you're right, Mark. There are two real Trump trades, if you will. There are dozens for both candidates, quite frankly. But the two that I believe are most telling on the Trump side are Bitcoin, as you said, and his stock, DJT, in which he's already made $4 billion on paper this year. So when you look at DJT, take a look at this, for instance, Mark. As you know, we talked about the unusual activity in this just recently. Well, today it's up another double-digit rally, which implies strongly that there's a lot of real money being committed, not on a betting site, but on a site where people make money if the stock goes up, and they are pouring dollars into DJT right now and some of its derivatives as well. So that's kind of there you see over the past month, the stock DJT is up 135% in the past month. Gives you an idea of where real money is being invested on him becoming the 47th president of these United States. But let's take a look at futures, Mark, because as you said, futures look like this. Fantastic if you're long Bitcoin, because it went from up 1,000 to up 2,000 to up over 4% today. And that is yet another Trump trade because, of course, the digital asset realm has never had a candidate, let alone a potential now president, that is so much in love with digital assets as Donald Trump is. He spoke at their big Bitcoin conference this year. There are many of us who believe that Gary Gensler has been an impediment to growth in this sector. And Donald Trump wants to keep the development of these digital assets onshore rather than having them go to Malta or having them go to Zug, Switzerland or wherever. And I applaud that. I think you do too. And we're hoping that this is yet another sign What do you have, Mark? Are you on the crude oil bandwagon or Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take just the other side of that trade, John. Maybe not the other side of the trade, but another component to the story that it's so important, and we've covered this on Newsmax and other networks, and that's the CBDC issue, right? So it's not even necessarily so much pro-crypto and onshoring all of that innovation that did go to places like the Bahamas and Zug and the Caribbean, but it's also having an administration that has no interest in pursuing complete and total control over your bank accounts and your pocket through the issuance of a CBDC. That, to me, is an even more important issue than innovation. Innovation is great, but we do not want the government in our pockets for sure. So I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing Bitcoin perform and crypto in general perform the way it has in anticipation, perhaps, of a Trump victory. But John, we got some AI stuff to talk about. AI and data, right? One of my favorites. It's hard to believe this thing went public. I guess it was in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. Palantir. You have here in some of your program notes. It's the messy of AI, and man, oh man, did they have, as I suggested in the cold open, did they please investors, market watchers, and certainly Palantir shareholders? They beat on the top. They beat on the bottom. Stock up about 20%, maybe even higher. I haven't looked in the past hour.
22.
22. There you go. Yep. Beautiful thing. Wedbush keeping a price target of 45 on this thing. Raising its price target from 45 to 57, which would represent a pretty significant pop from where the stock is right now. An unbelievable quarter. And look, John, it's the AI story, and part of what I also teased or posited in the cold open. You got a lot of skeptics saying this is another bubble forming. This is another .com bubble. This is another bubble, the likes of which we've seen. It's going to end badly. I don't agree with that. I don't think we're in bubble territory yet. What say you, and do you think Palantir has further to go?
I do think it can go much further, Mark. It is a minor part of my portfolio right now. I wish it was a major part. It keeps defying gravity. I mean, as you said, came out in 2020, maybe $10 a share or something like that. Maybe it was even under 10. And here it is trading to a new all-time high today of $51+ a share. That's pretty outstanding performance in just 4 years. And there's the unusual activity you see on your screen that we had for Palantir. People were betting that this one would go higher. They've been right. They've been richly rewarded. And as you say, I wish I could claim it, but Dan Ives said it's the Messi, as in that world famous soccer player that makes $1 billion for being one of the greatest players of all time. It's the Messi of AI. And, cybersecurity, yeah, great. That's a very popular segment of the market. And cybersecurity with AI so that it can anticipate and learn and so forth, well, even better. And that's why I think you're seeing the kind of love being showered upon this stock right now. And I don't think it stops in the short term anyway, Mark. I think it keeps going.
Yeah, listen, I think it does too. And one thing I've been impressed with is one of the big criticisms of the company from when they went public was the extent to which their business relied on government contracts, particularly in the cyberspace. They've done a great job of diversifying. They've done a great job of private sector penetration. And I think you see these results benefiting from that and other initiatives. So yeah, I remain bullish on this name. I think Wedbush is probably right in terms of their price target. I might look to add on some dips. Let's keep the AI conversation going, John. Let's talk about Astera Labs, another one rocking and rolling, not only on their reporting, but on their guidance. They beat estimates. Of course, this is a relatively new, certainly compared to Palantir. I think Palantir is a newly minted public company from 2020. This one is definitely still in the puppy stage, having gone public only in March of this year. And John, what I love about this one is, and we've talked about it a lot, the growth in AI when it comes to the chip sector, which has had some trouble lately thanks to Supermicro and everything that went on there with Hindenburg and the auditor resignation. But where we've said this before, where I think the growth in AI and chips, a lot of it is going to be in the GPU space, right? It's graphic processing. These are more complicated chips than chips used for AI that just do text. The AI has to analyze video. These chips have to be faster. They have more compute power. They're more expensive. That's what this company makes, and that's one of the reasons why they did so well in their last quarter. What's your outlook on this one?
Well, you're exactly right on all those points. They're entering a new growth phase. That was according to the CEO himself. He said, our business has now entered this new growth phase with multiple product families ramping across AI platforms on both third-party GPUs and internally developed AI accelerators. And speaking of accelerating, Mark, take a look at the acceleration of these calls, because the stock is now up 34% on the day, and they were buying calls in ALAB, which is a sign that people are betting on higher prices. Generally, Mark, Pete, and I, folks, buy at the money calls if it's a call option and sell above the market. If it was a put, we'd buy at the money put and sell below the market, putting on a one-to-one spread that requires no additional capital to establish and hold that position, but it affects how much money you have to outlay and what your percentage return on invested capital can be. So this is pretty phenomenal. ALAB, like I say, trading 14 million shares. Normal turnover is 3.6 million. Yeah, I'd say they've done a lot right with this report, Mark. It traded all the way up to 93.54 today, and now it's even higher than that. So pretty damned interesting stock to have, and I'm sure all of us that have it wish we had more.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look at that unusual coming out on Wednesday of last week, just the day before Halloween, 10,000 lot. That is a massive, massive trade. Folks, when you see something like that in our unusual service, assuming that you're in it, if you're not, you got to get into it. Go to marketrebellion.com/get started for picks like that. But when you see a lot size of 10,000 in just about anything, you got to pay attention. John, why don't I let you take the last two? I've been hogging the spotlight here.
No, you're doing a great job. Lattice Semiconductor. We finally found a couple stocks that weren't exploding higher.
Yeah.
We do not have unusual activity in this one from days prior, but Lattice Semiconductor, inline EPS, inline sales, but they warned about what it looks like going forward. And for that reason, they are taking this one apart today, Mark. LSCC was really hammered in the pre-market, made a little bit of a recovery, but for the most part, is still down about 3% on the day. It was down as much as 12 early on. So a nice recovery from a low of about $49 to now $50 and maybe 50 cents or so. So a recovery, but still they didn't appreciate that they warned going forward.
Yeah, and a pretty significant cost-cutting program being implemented by the CEO over there. As you probably know, John, they announced that they were slashing 14% of their workforce. I think these most recent earnings also reflected about a $7 million one-time charge and expense associated with that cost reduction program. And it's interesting when investors think that a cost reduction program like this one that's announced actually has legs, the stock usually does well, right? We saw that with one of our favorite names, Spirit Airlines, a couple of weeks ago. But against the backdrop of the earnings, against the backdrop of the forward guidance of being somewhat sanguine, that cost-cutting program, not enough to lift that stock out of the doldrums.
No. And what could be worse than that, Mark? Well, we're about to show you, folks. Because what could be worse? Well, let's see. Celanese. Third quarter numbers from operations were $1.08 a share, down from, get this, folks, $8.70 last year. at this time. That's a pretty big drop off in terms of how much they make from continuing operations. And it just gets worse from there, Mark. They're having to tighten their belt in a very serious way. They cut the dividend to your cold opening. They cut the dividend 95%. In other words, they're basically telling the world, we can't afford to pay the dividend. We're not earning enough money to pay the dividend. Well, people are heading to the exits and they're voting with their feet, Mark, as we like to say in the markets. They're leaving, and that's not good for CE Celanese, which is trading near the market lows right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, anytime you get a dividend, a divvy dive, as I called it in the cold open, anytime you get a dividend reduction like this that's almost close to zero, you're going to see selling. It's forced selling in many cases because the stock no longer meets the requirements of institutional holders. That if I'm buying a dividend name like this one, and this is an industrial, I'm going to talk about that in a second, and I'm buying it for that dividend yield, if that dividend yield doesn't meet the criteria of my fund's mandate any longer, I have to sell, whether or not I still like the stock itself. And there's not a lot of reason to like the stock itself. But the question for you, John, I mean, this is a specialty chemical company. This is one of those ones, and I know I've used this joke before, where they've got a 60-second commercial on CNBC of cargo ships and farmers and people walking through wheat fields and smiling, and at the end of the commercial you go, I don't know, what the hell do they do or sell? It's kind of one of those, right? They're specialty chemicals, paint, coatings, things of that nature. What does this performance say, and what does this rather downward guidance of going forward to 25 say about where we are from an economic perspective and what we should expect for GDP next year, regardless of who wins today? Because to me, pretty bad news, right? I mean, this is a company that makes stuff that manufacturers need in a pretty wide swath of sectors.
You're absolutely right, Mark. You and I talk frequently about what's going on with consumers. They're piling on debt. We all know that. You've accurately called for months now, perhaps the entire year, about the buy now, pay later stocks like Klarna and Affirm, and how investors are having to use those because they've maxed out their credit cards. Well, this is showing you what a big manufacturer that serves other manufacturers is seeing going forward. I mean, coatings, paints, things for the automobile and industrial sectors that Celanese makes. This is all not good news for all of those sectors. So when they cut the dividend, they know they're going to impact the share price. No one wants to do that. But when you just don't have the money, and when you think that it could be still getting worse in some of those sectors, you understand why people are stepping away from CE Celanese and why it's down so severely today.
Yeah, I mean, it worries me, to be candid, right? I mean, companies like this tend to be the proverbial canary in a coal mine when you're looking at reduced GDP and exports and things of that nature, because they make the stuff that everybody else needs to make the stuff that gets sold to consumers. You wouldn't be a customer as a consumer of this company's products, most likely. So we got to keep an eye on that. Definitely some work to be done in 2025 by whoever gets the POTUS post at the end of the day today, John. So let's move it in a little bit less serious. I know folks like this part of the show. Let's talk Pete's Red Zone Sports. Pete's not here. Pete is in faraway European lands enjoying some much needed and much earned downtime with his lovely wife. Let's talk NCAA football, John. Indiana. When was the last time Indiana was ranked above Alabama? I mean, they're undefeated. They're having an unbelievable year. Can they sustain?
Well, pretty much the last time, to answer your question, Mark, never. I mean, I can't remember Indiana being in the top 10, and they are right now, versus Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M. Those are all schools with unbelievable traditions of football. And Indiana has put out some great players. In fact, one of the guy that won the Heisman last year transferred from Indiana to Washington. So they do have some great football players from time to time at Indiana, but rarely do they have what they have right now, which is a 9-0 football team, Mark. 9-0 anywhere is an amazing accomplishment. They're 6-0 in Big Ten play. They're in the top 10 in the nation. This is a phenomenal job by this Curt Cignetti, the head coach, who has come in there and just made this probably the toughest ticket to get in the central United States. I mean, I think it'd be easier to get a ticket for a Nebraska game than an Indiana game right now, or maybe even Ohio State or even Michigan, because these guys, when they finally break through, as they appear to have done, people are just gaga over Indiana football. And the Hoosiers, well, they're mainly known for basketball, of course, Mark, but this looks like an exception and an exceptionally great year for Indiana. So kudos to them and to their players and coach.
Yeah, fantastic, and definitely fun to watch and continue to watch. Let's move over to the pros, the NFL. Boy, oh boy, is it hard to be a Dallas fan, and so far this season. And look, as we talked about yesterday, being beset, it seems like almost every weekend, with injury after injury impacting how that team's been able to perform. Only 3 wins so far this year, John. Are they the biggest disappointment in the NFC?
Yeah, they are. That's easy. They have to be. AFC, yeah, it's disappointing that the Jets are not doing well. They've already fired their head coach.
Jets aren't doing well?
Yeah, they're not. That's why Scaramucci hasn't invited you and I to a game this year.
I don't think that's the only reason, but let's skip over that.
They can't give those tickets away, Mark. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was supposed to be the savior. I'm not hanging all this on Aaron Rodgers, but my gosh, that team has struggled. And Aaron certainly not having one of those years like he had to become a 3-time MVP of the league. But the Cowboys, it might just get worse, Mark. They are playing at home in AT&T Stadium 5 days hence, where they will be hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles, yeah, they don't have Jason Kelce anymore, Travis's brother, but what they do have is a 6-2 record and a much better team than apparently the Cowboys have right now. And I think it's going to be a very difficult path for them going forward, and certainly not a very patient owner of this team, because Jerry Jones, who's made one of the best investments in the history of sports, buying this team for, I think, $130 million back in the 80s. It's now worth close to $7 billion. Some say even more. But my gosh, Jerry is not happy, cannot be happy, and the fans are embarrassed by the way this team has played, Mark. So, yeah, this is, you know how our friends in Texas are, because you visited a lot of them during the pandemic when you drove across the country checking out oil rigs and such. Dallas is all about football, and this year it is all about hating its own Lone Star State Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for reminding me of that COVID trip, as one does during a pandemic, is go to an oil field. And I think the only part of Texas that is even more football obsessed than Dallas is the oil patch. I mean, Friday Night Lights. That's
Yep.
all based in Odessa, where I spent a fair amount of time. That is the cradle of the oil industry, the oil field services industry, for sure. And it is an absolute religion in that part of the world. And in fact, my friend Cody, I won't say his last name, his son Jace, that may give it away, is looking like one of the leaders in the state in high school right now, playing under those famous Friday Night Lights there in Odessa. So congratulations to him. So, John, as we do, We've come to the end of the show, and as we do at this point in time, it is time for shameless publicity. We may need some theme music for shameless publicity. Yes, that's right. John's holding up our latest book, It's Not an Option. You can get that by going to our website or going to itsnotanoption.com. Just pay shipping and handling, and it will be delivered to you promptly. We've also got to remind folks, if you have not grabbed one of the last remaining tickets, there is still time to join us for the Rebel Mastermind on November the 19th in Aventura, Florida. We'll have our producer pop up the QR code there. That event, of course, is the third day of 10X Wealth. That's November 17th and 18th. You can join us there. We have ticket bundles for both events. You can join us there and see Pete, John, myself, and lots of other luminaries such as Gary Cohn, Bill Pulte. I don't know if you noticed, John, but Grant announced that our friend Francis Suarez, the suave and debonair mayor of Miami, is also joining us. It's going to be great to see him. I haven't seen him in about a year or so. So, folks, if you're interested in that, you can go to 10xwealth.com, go to marketrebellion.com and hit our events page or scan the QR code. We would love to see you. John, when are we going to see each other, and when are the folks going to see us again? I think tomorrow, right?
Yep, we are back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so set your clocks. If you need to adjust them because of daylight savings time, make sure you do. It's 1 p.m. Eastern time for the Rebel Edge with Mark Lopresti and John Najarian. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.
Get out and vote.